Hey, reseller friends. Hey, everyone. I see lots of familiar faces. Tell us in the comments where you are joining in from. Thanks for your patience during our brief delay getting started here. Lots and lots of people here. I see some familiar faces and some new ones. Hey, everyone. And the chat's going crazy. We've got Milwaukee, New Hampshire, Wisconsin, Georgia, not all over the place. All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to Thrive in 2025 Reseller Business Management webinar. At Vendue, we are a seller's best friend, always hosting webinars, workshops, and calls to give you valuable information to help you scale and grow your resale business. I'm Erin from Vendue, and I am very excited to welcome our special guest today, Isa from the Global Collective Co. Welcome, Isa. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, everyone. Hello. There was a quick moment there where I got nervous for a second, but we've got the presentation up and we're ready to go. So I'm ready. I don't know. You?
Awesome. Yes. Okay. So the format for this webinar is Isa will present. There's a live Q&A at the end. We do ask that you put questions not in the chat, but in the Q&A. And at the end, we will go through and Isa will answer some of those questions live. Thanks everyone for joining. And Isa, take it away.
Okay, you guys. So welcome to Thrive in 2025. This is a Reseller Business Management presentation. I'm really excited to do this right now, starting strong in January. There's a lot that can happen this year, good, bad, ugly, but the whole reason we're here and running these kinds of businesses is we're here to manage the business. Whatever comes our way, we got to manage it. So here we go. So we're here to learn to track, analyze, and grow your reselling business. Okay, these are very important things and they all go together. At the end of the day, I'm pretty sure we all want to make money and we want to focus on our profits. But in order to get that result, there are a lot of things that we have to do along the way to get there. And listen, it's not all sexy. Here's the thing, right? Managing isn't always super sexy. Like analyzing data doesn't have the best rep. But I want to make tracking your numbers fun. I know it sounds ridiculous, but listen, I am not one of those people that was like a math junkie or like super into spreadsheets or whatever. What I am is somebody that loves progress and growth. And once I realized that looking at these metrics and understanding the story that they tell, I could grow the business, I could limit or lower my time investment. It all became a really fun game. So I know it sounds kind of ridiculous if you're one of those people that's like, I don't love data, I don't love math. I think you're not looking at it the right way, and you might learn to love it. So let's look into it. So first of all, I'm hosting this with Vendue, and I really appreciate Vendue for bringing me on to this. Vendue is absolutely a necessity in this business, seller's best friend, helping you save time and scale your business with powerful tools. And that's one of the things that I do want to talk about today. You can be really good at what you do. You could be a great sourcer. You can have the eye. You can be the creative. But the reality is we need tools to help us get there. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with me, but I'm all about investing in the stuff that's going to help you grow. So I'm a luxury reseller, a business mentor, a corporate escapee, and founder of the Global Collective. And I basically guide resellers to profit and productivity. But I want to rephrase that to I teach people to manage their business, because I think the real success is nobody can promise you forever good months, forever good years, right? An upward trend, eternal upward trend. But to learn to manage the ups and downs, like capitalizing on the good times and learning to maintain and kind of like mitigate your losses in the bad times, it is what makes a business successful. So let's talk about the outline a little bit. We're going to talk about knowing your numbers, tracking your numbers, using your numbers. Three very different things, and we're going to go through them. Erin's going to walk us through the Vendue tools. I'm going to talk about facts over feelings, which is probably one of my favorite subjects, something that I talk about very often in my account, in my courses and my classes, because it is one of the biggest barriers we have to managing a business. We'll talk about it. We'll talk a little bit about who I am and why you might want to listen to me, and then we're going to go into the live Q&A. Okay, keep going. So know your numbers is the first section here. And before I even show you anything on this slide, I want to talk about something really important that I realized when I was doing one-on-one reseller consultations. A lot of people know their numbers in the sense that they can recite their numbers, right? I would get into these consultations. They would send me either no numbers, numbers written on a notebook, or a giant spreadsheet, right? And I would ask people, like, tell me your numbers, right? Just tell me the metrics in your business. And people could go, well, I made this much, and this is my ASP, and this is how many units I have, and they could recite certain things, right? But then I would tell them, okay, tell me what that says about your business, right? All those numbers that you just recited, tell me what story that's telling you in your business. And it would be crickets, right? So I want you guys to write down, if anyone's taking notes on this, there is a massive difference between knowing your numbers and understanding your numbers, like understanding the metrics, right? I don't want you to be able to recite numbers by memory or be able to read them off a spreadsheet or a dashboard or whatever. I want you to learn to understand what story those numbers are telling, how your average profit connects to your total units sold, how that connects to your total profit for the year, how your sell-through rates tell you a story of what's happening in your business. I want you to get to a point where you see a spreadsheet and you don't just see numbers, you see a colorful story about what's happening in your business. So the other thing I want to talk about is, let me go into this actually. So what numbers should I know, or should you know, or should we all know, right? Well, this is my recommendation of the top numbers you're going to want to know about your business. You guys can take a screenshot of this or write this down or whatever. I want to make sure that you guys know these top metrics that I'm recommending. Now, why am I limited? I know there's like 100 different metrics on 100 different programs, 100 different screens and spreadsheets, right? So why am I limiting you on numbers, right? Why are my suggestions limited? There is a thing as too much data, too much information. We are human, and we can only really process a certain amount of items a minute, a second, or whatever, right? Our brains can only do so much. So I'm going to give you an example, and I'm your average Sally, right? I'm no genius over here. I learned to like data because of a corporate job that I had where I had to constantly excuse what I was doing or back up my decisions with data to my bosses, right? I had to learn. But I'm going to tell you a story of my business partner, Christine, who's partnered with me on the dashboard. When I met Christine, we were doing a consultation and she sent me her spreadsheet. This was the most dense, craziest spreadsheet I've ever seen. This woman is a mining engineer, like next level genius, right? And so you would think Christine was crushing it with all this data and calculations and all these things she could do even in her head, right? But her problem was analysis paralysis. She had too much information, so she couldn't take the leap. So for you guys, for the rest of us, listen, if you're Christine and you want to add 70,000 extra metrics, go ahead. But for us, I would suggest we focus on this, which is total revenue, cash flow, gross profit, average profit, top categories, sell-through rates, and fixed costs. So these are the numbers I think you should know. The next thing on the, yeah.
Can you explain, because I've heard you talk about this
Oh,
before,
sorry.
can you explain
Yeah.
why you recommend average profit per unit over average sale price?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about it a little bit further in the deck. But the reason I go so hard on average profit per unit versus ASP is ASP doesn't tell you the full story of profitability. And I think what ends up happening with ASP is it's a higher metric. So it ends up being like a vanity metric, right? And especially for those of us that go into higher flips and designer stuff, our ASPs are massive. But the real question is, how much new money is our money making, right? And I will go into that, Erin. I think it's because it's on the fourth slide, but I'll definitely dive into that. So let's go into total revenue, right? That's a fancy word for how much did you sell? That would be the total sales that came in for the year, right? And this is the overall top number where you're going to subtract everything else from. But we need to make sure we know what we're doing in total sales every year to track the growth year over year. Because again, we're not going to have crazy growth every single year we do this, right? That's not normal for anyone on earth. So what you want to do is track your total revenue through the years, right? And keep that data somewhere so that, let's just say, this year you kind of tumble a little bit. It's a tougher year. And our emotions, which we're going to talk about in Facts Over Feelings, you're going to start being really hard on yourself. You're going to consider quitting. Maybe I'm not good at this. Maybe this just isn't my thing. But if you go back to where you started, and you see your total revenues and how it's changed over the years, it's important to know if you're on an upward trajectory, right? And at the end of the day, cash is king. You need to be able to pay for those things, including yourself, which we're going to get into the next section. Cash flow. So I did 275 individual business consultations before I came up with my course. I can tell you guys, hands down, one of the biggest issues most reseller businesses face are cash management issues. They blow through cash. They end up with a lot of product and not enough money to run the business. So the question you need to ask yourself regarding cash flow is, how much money do you have to work with, right? How much money actually hits your bank account? Because that's the money that you can use, right? That top revenue number, we got to take fees out of that. We got to take other things out of that. So the money that's actually in your business account that you're going to run with that month, that's what you need to know. So managing money flow is essential to business success. You need to know how much actual money hits your account yearly and when. The reason I say yearly is it's much easier to, I think another issue that resellers tend to have, or business owners in general, are they try to manage everything monthly, which is good. We need to have a view of things monthly, but you got to step back a lot further and plan out your year in terms of cash flow. Because I'm speaking personally, but I'm sure you guys do. Like, I have a lot of subscriptions of tools that I need for the business, for the course, platforms, stuff like that, right? And some of them are really expensive and they hit at certain times, right? And then at some point I bring people in to help me with launches and stuff like that. I do really big buys in my biggest quarters. All of this I know how to do because I step back and I plan my business, my cash flow a year in advance. So, it's usually having a yearly plan of how you're going to allocate your cash, assuming that the trend is going to follow the past years. So an example would be, a lot of us experience the summer slowdown, right? And a lot of people, when summer slowdown comes in, you see people panicking on social media and fire selling things. And, it does cause anxiety if you don't know it's coming. But if you're tracking your data and you're making an annual business plan, you would know already that summer is when you're going to hit your dip in certain months. And so you're able to better plan for it. Most businesses have cash flow issues. That's why a lot of businesses go down. So again, I can't stress enough how important it is to manage your finances. Gross profit. How much new money is your money making? Similar to cash flow, gross profit is the total sales minus the cost of goods. What we really want to know here is how much new money was made from our investment. Sorry, I got a little connection error mistake. I'm back. How much new money is made from our return on investment, right? Not just the money you put in, but the return on time investment too. We want to know how much all of what you did this month, this quarter, this year was worth. Now, most businesses have issues with profitability. You see a lot of people go, oh, I made a bunch of money. I don't know where it is. Or I made a bunch of money, but my expenses exceeded that, right? There's a great book that I like to recommend. It's called Profit First, but it teaches you how to understand managing the money and taking profits first, because a lot of people don't even pay themselves. So that is something that is really important to focus on. I'm going to give you guys a second to see this. Take a screenshot if you need to.
We have a pull up, time is money, asking if people are tracking their time. So far, we have 11% yes, 21% sometimes, and 69% no.
So this is what I saw most oftenly in those consultations that I told you I did. It was astonishing to know that people were not tracking their time investment, when the reality is time is our most valuable resource. It's the only one we can't replace. It's the only one we can't get back. Like once it's spent, it's gone. If you lost all of your money right now, I mean, none of us want that to happen, but if you did, you could make more back. You could get a loan. You could borrow from someone. You can get that back. Whereas time, that's gone. And a lot of you have children, and a lot of you have, other things that require your attention. And so we really have to start thinking about how much time are we investing in this business and how much are we getting back? Now, another question I used to talk about in my consultations was, you not tracking your time investment in this business, right? And a lot of the reactions were, but I love it. Like, I love to thrift. It's something I love to do. Like, it's really fun. I love the community, all that stuff, right? Well, if you flip that question, right, would you take a corporate job that was like a fancy title, right? And it sounded important, and you were paid to do something relatively interesting or cool, but they didn't tell you how much you were going to make. Would you take the job? No, right? Because you would want to know how much they're willing to give you for your time. So it's absolutely shocking that we'd be willing to do it to ourselves, but when someone else does that to us, we're like, no, that's not good. But then when you do it to yourself, it's like, oh yeah, no problem. It doesn't matter what I make. So I really want you guys to think about the time investment that goes into it. Is it worth it? Because if it's not, it doesn't mean you have to quit. It just means you got to re-examine your metrics to make it worth your time. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one. Average profit. And this is what Erin was talking about. How much new money are you making per unit processed? So when I started giving information, when my Instagram turned reseller facing, I started talking a lot, like really heavily, about average profit per unit. And it was something of very foreign in the community because everyone ran on ASP, right? I'm not saying you shouldn't know your ASP. I'm just saying that doesn't tell you how profitable your business is or how much new money your money is making. So I like to know the average profit of a good. And an example for me is, let's say I have a $600 shoe sale, right? And this is in one of my free classes that I'll talk about later, but this example is from there. Let's say that I sell a shoe for $600, right? And so then I can go ahead and say, and my ASP is $600. But what if I only made, listen, I know this sounds like a lot. What if I made $200 profit from that flip, right? Well, the ASP is massive, but the average profit is the real money that came back with that original investment, right? So what we want to focus on is that return. Now, on the flip side, I made $200 from that $600 ASP, right? What if I sold some sandals, right, for 400? Sounds less impressive at 600, but I ended up making the same amount of profit because the cost was lower. See what I mean? At the end of the day, ASP isn't giving you the true story behind the profitability of each item and of the business. So how do you get your average profit? You take your total profit of whatever time frame you're running, and you divide it by units sold. That way you know how much money is made from each unit you process per average. So this is where it gets exciting, because this is a great way to understand what your time is worth in the business. Now, I encourage my people, my students, the people that follow me, to roughly time themselves doing all of the things you do for reselling. So, because we do all of the processes separately. So you thrift one day, and then you forget about it. And then you come back and you do the photographing, steaming, listing, whatever you do, right? Or maybe you do the photographing one day and then you forget about it. And then you list later, right? Then the shipping comes when the item sells. But the reality is all of those processes were necessary to make that average profit per unit for that item. So if it took you 2 hours at the thrift store that original day and you found, 10 items, right? You got to divide that time by those 10 items. Then you got to include the time that it took to steam, measure, list, photograph, and ship for that one unit. And that's going to give you an idea of what your hourly pay. And it might be scary for some people to face it. I remember when I did the consultations and people would come back with the math and be like, oh my God, this is terrible. This is so sad. Well, hold on. This is great because now you know. Now you're operating from an understanding. Like now you have the knowledge that this is not enough for you. So now you've got to push up. None of this is intended for you guys to quit. I want you to face reality on all of this and go, wait a minute. I am not paying myself enough for what I'm doing. So I got to give myself a raise. How do I do that? Let me go check my numbers and see where the opportunity is. Okay. And again, from these consultations, I can tell you dead straight, most people are not making enough for their time investment in this business. So that's something that I'm hoping to change. I'm going to give you guys just a few seconds to take a picture, write stuff down, anything you need from this.
Tell us in the comments if you are tracking the money investment in time that you have in your inventory.
This is a scary one. And it should be scary if you don't know, but I want you to feel super empowered once you know and go, now I know where my starting point is, and now I'm going to figure out what I want out of this, and now I can figure out how to get there, right?
You said something that resonates. I think a lot of us as resellers justify it. We say, well, it's flexible. I can be home with my kids, or well, I get to thrift and I'm doing something I love, and those things are true. And we will take some monetary concessions for flexibility and enjoyment, but a business, right, requires appropriate margins, and we should be working for, I would say, well over your state's minimum wage, because you're also bearing all of the expenses and liability of your own business. Whereas if you worked for someone else, they would take care of all of that and provide benefits. It's definitely
Exactly.
eye-opening when you start tracking your time and see how much you're paying yourself.
And I think you said something really interesting, Erin. Like it is true, but two things can be true at once, right? It is true that you guys love to thrift and you do something that you enjoy and like it gives you flexibility to be with your kids at home. So that's a truth, right? But it can also be true that you're not paying yourself enough for the amount of work that you're putting in. And so another thing is like, I enjoy sourcing, I do almost all online sourcing, so I can do it from anywhere. And I was talking to a student the other day, and it's like, dude, I enjoy what I do, but I also really enjoy like getting a massage or not moving for an hour. So you really have to think about how much you're getting for the time invested in this business, regardless of whether you enjoy it or not. Because again, you wouldn't take a job from a company with really low pay just because you like it. You would want to be given what you think you're worth, right? Or at least enough to pay your bills and enjoy your freedom or your time or whatever. I'm moving on, okay? Are we here?
Yes.
Okay. So now let's move on to tracking your numbers. Now I told you guys what you should be focused on, what numbers you should consider tracking, what numbers will tell you a story. But I want you to remember this, and I want you to write this down in your notes. Those 6 that I told you, that, in my opinion, that is the data that matters, right? So I want you to focus on tracking the data that matters for the goals that you want to achieve. So the do's and don'ts of tracking data. Do not track information just to track. And again, this is something that I saw very often in my consultations. People would send me their spreadsheets, their, different ways of organizing their data, and they would feel proud because they would feel a sense of accomplishment, like, oh, I can send her something with my numbers in there, right? It doesn't help in any way if you can't read the data you're tracking. If it's too complex, if you don't understand what you're looking at, it doesn't matter how pretty it is or how organized it is, or the fact that you can filter by, alphabetize it or whatever. You need to be intentional with the data that you're tracking and what programs you're using. Okay. So that's a really big don't. I get that it's January and we all want to start, and you're going to, Sally Reseller at some point gave you some sort of a tracker and you're like, oh, I remember I have that thing, I'm just going to use it. But you have no idea what you're reading off of it. I want you to be intentional and find something that you understand, that makes sense to you. And everyone will be different. Everyone understands different things. Everyone has, some people are more visual, some people are more data driven. Just make sure that you're tracking information that matters to you. Something else I would advise on tracking data is to keep it simple. Okay, there are a lot of moving parts to this business. Try to get something that not only you understand, but is easy to fill out and something that you're going to be consistent on. Because I think that's one of the biggest hurdles, is when it's a little bit hard for people to use whatever situation they're using, they get that analysis paralysis. It does kind of weigh them down, and then people either just stop tracking, or they kind of track and then they forget and then they come back, and it's just too overwhelming. So I want you to keep data simple, okay? I want you to understand how to read data. I want you to understand what you're getting out of whatever system you're using and why you're doing what you do. That's really important. So once you guys track your time, and if you realize that you're not paying yourself enough or what you would like to make, the next step would probably be, I probably need more revenue and profit, right? Because you want to make money as you spend money, as you manage that money. But that's what I want you to understand is, okay, so if this is my problem and this is where I want to get, what's the path that I have to take towards this, right? And your data has all of that answer. The craziest thing is, I call our dashboard the business cheat sheet, because that's what I want you to feel when you look at your data. It's telling you what it needs. Hey, Isa, look over here. We got an issue with the profit per unit. We got an issue with the sell-through rate over here. That means you're not buying the right stuff, or you're paying too much for your product. So I want you to understand how to read the data that you're using. This is a huge one. Make sure your numbers can answer your big business questions, okay? And again, this goes back to your charts. And this is why I'm such an advocate of keeping charts for years, because they all tell a story. So you cannot replicate what you did in past years, but you can learn from it. So if something's going wrong this year, you can go check your charts from last year and the year before that and go, okay, well, there is a dip in, transactions. So what was my average profit back then? Ooh, turns out that my average profit was lower back then. So I'm doing less transactions now, but the money's still there. Does that make sense? Like, I want you to be able to answer questions you have in your business first by looking at your charts. Like, I'll go into this example on the facts over feelings. But the next thing I want you to do is track consistently and analyze often. And I don't mean daily. I'm not a fan of daily because nothing changes daily. But if you're consistent with your tracking and you analyze, say, glance at it monthly and then really dig into it quarterly, you're going to start to see a lot of things that you haven't noticed before. But again, that takes consistency because if you aren't tracking consistently, you don't have the full story. And then by the time you want to get the full story, you got to go back and fill everything out. And that's going to overwhelm you. And so that already throws you off. Staying consistent, regardless of what's happening, is going to give you more in the long run. And I tell this to my people all the time too. There's only so much you can see in a month or a week, right? Or week or a month or daily. Same thing when you look at the stock charts, the stock market. If you track a stock for like a week, it kind of looks like this. If you track it for a month, maybe there were really bad news about that company, so it kind of looks like that. But if you look at it quarterly and then for the year, if it's a good company, it's usually an upward trend. So that's kind of what you want to think about when you're tracking. You're going to track daily because you're going to be consistent about it, but I want you to analyze often, not daily, and really dig into it quarterly. And then I really want you guys to use web tools like Vendue that is going to completely free up time from doing things that nobody should be doing manually. And then I have my dashboard, which we'll go over it in a little bit, but it is more specific into the stuff that I like to focus on, which is the average profit per unit, processing less units to make more. So it is geared more towards people with lower volume, who want to get into the lower volume, higher profit models. Okay, girl.
Let's talk about Vendoo. So you were learning so much. If you're like me, you're getting a little overwhelmed with everything Isa's sharing. And you might be wondering, well, how do I track all that? Vendoo helps you track quite a bit of this. Right in Vendoo, as you provide information about your items, Vendoo actually tracks it for you. So you'll notice in your Vendoo form where you can enter things like your date of acquisition and your cost of goods. That information lives in Vendoo, where it will always be, and it's also available for download in a spreadsheet. So Vendoo makes it so that you don't have to keep your own spreadsheet. Just as you use Vendoo and provide it the information it needs, the spreadsheet can be downloaded in real time, customized at any time, which alleviates a lot of the time you'd otherwise spend in boring, overwhelming spreadsheets. Next slide. Here is what the spreadsheet looks like, and this is an example opened in Apple Numbers. Now, a CSV file is just a fancy acronym for a spreadsheet that is compatible with any spreadsheet software. So whether you prefer the Google Sheets, Microsoft Excel, Apple Numbers, QuickBooks, really anything, you can customize your headings, customize your date range, and download this spreadsheet. You'll see it's a very tiny example, but you can customize what you'd like to download. All information about your listings is available, but most importantly, that includes information like your date of acquisition, your cost of goods, your date of sale, your marketplace fees, shipping fees, and sale price, putting the dates and numbers that you need for practical purposes, bookkeeping purposes, and tax purposes at your fingertips, and not requiring that you manage that independently. And next slide. Another thing that Vendue does that's amazing is Isa's favorite, charts and graphics. When you enter your sales details into Vendue, telling it how much you sold an item for and what your fees were, Vendue gives you some powerful analytics. And this is just some of them up here on the screen. If you look on the top, you're seeing your overall revenue and profit per period, and you can customize this. Whether you'd like to look at a day, a week, a month, a year, a quarter, anything. You can see in that period your total revenue as well as your total profit. We help track the number of sold items, the number of listed items, and don't tell Isa, average sale price, which is interesting to know, even if it's not quite as helpful as average per unit. I'm just teasing Isa. You'll also
Listen, you should know it, guys. You should know it.
You'll also see on the right that we have comparisons. We talked about the importance of looking at month over month and more importantly, year over year. Vendoo does that for you at a glance, showing you you're up in the green, for example, and when I'm down in the red in comparison with the last period. Beyond that, Vendoo will also give you your stats for all marketplaces, which is amazing. A lot of marketplaces provide us stats, but none but Vendoo can give you stats everywhere you sell all at once. Even if you sell online, in person, at yard sales, anywhere and everywhere you sell, Vendoo can track that for you. In the bottom left graph in the pie charts, you'll see that we break down your marketplace profit and revenue. We also have these color coded, colored to the logos of the marketplaces. Beyond that, then you have your top selling categories, subcategories, and brands, putting the information and the value behind the information right at your fingertips to help you make better sourcing and selling decisions. These are just a few of the ways that Vendoo can help you to know your numbers and not just recite them, but interpret, analyze, and implement them to make better decisions that help scale. Back to you.
Yes. Well, I just cut you off there. Sorry about that. Well, Erin, we're going into my absolute favorite part of all that I do, and it's talking about facts over feelings because your business can run like a Swiss train, but your mind doesn't. Our minds go crazy, at least mine personally, it loses it every so often. So we have to remind ourselves that our feelings aren't necessarily facts, and that's not what our business needs. So stop running on feelings. I need to tell everyone here, but as I tell you, I'm going to look in the mirror and tell myself, stop running on feelings. These are some of the messages that I get from students, followers, etc., right? I'll get a DM that says, Isa, I feel like sales have been so slow. I don't know what to do. Now, if this is a student, they get no grace from me. Like the first thing is, I want to see your chart. Like send me your chart right now before I even talk to you, right? So this is where the feelings kind of take over. And like this particular example was a student of mine, and she felt like sales were super slow. She wasn't shipping as often. So then she was going down this downward spiral of like, what am I doing wrong, etc. She hadn't checked her numbers. So once we went and checked her data, she actually had shipped less items. She was right, but she was making more profit per unit. So the reality is the money was in her account. She just felt like she was doing less. I don't know about you guys, but my entire life motto is do less and make the same or more. That's just me. Like I would prefer to work less. So it's funny how her head tricked her into this like, sadness and I'm not enough and I'm not doing enough and how do I fix this problem? There was no problem. Fact, she was shipping less units. Fact, the same money was in her account. So another thing I get is I feel like reselling is just getting harder, like sales just aren't there, everything's bad, things are changing, right? The fact is consumer sentiment is shifting in general. There's a lot going on in the world, right? But at the same time, I might have the wrong product for that shift. I might be priced incorrectly for that shift. Maybe I haven't tested market research and seen what's happening on these platforms during this time. So the feeling that like, oh, everything is just so terrible, I should just quit. Well, you know, that can be true. Consumer sentiment can change, but that doesn't get you off the hook for managing the business. Figuring out what it is you could do with the information you have to make things happen. So another feeling is this would happen in the consultations too. We would go through their top selling brands and categories, and I would look at their chart and notice that jeans were a top profiting category, but they were only selling, 5 a month. And I would say, hey, girlfriend, why don't you check jeans out? And the reaction would be, I feel like jeans just don't sell for me. No data, no proof, no nothing. Just a feeling that jeans just don't sell for that one human on earth, right? Well, the fact was, this person didn't source jeans because she didn't like them. So when she saw her sell through rates and the amount of units she was selling of them, they were low, but she was causing that by avoiding them, right? But if she had looked at the full story, her dashboard is trying to tell her, or her data is trying to tell her, jeans pay her the most to work or are one of the top paying categories. So the reality is she's shunning away a category that's paying her better than others just because she doesn't like them. Because I don't feel like doing that. Um, I have a lot of students who fought me on like handbags. I just don't like them. I don't like to photograph them. I don't think they do well. Well, you haven't tried them. So until you have facts proving that handbags do not sell or do not pay you enough, these are all feelings. Okay. So I want you guys to take a second to read this because we all probably recognize ourselves in one of these comments. And I am not exempt from this. Okay. I do this stuff all the time, but I have now programmed myself when I say something like that, my other voice, yes, I have multiple voices, goes like, prove it. What you just said, prove it. Like, show me on your data that what you're saying is true. And spoiler alert, a lot of times I can't. So that's how we are ruled by feelings.
In the poll here,
Moving.
we have
Yeah.
24% say they run their business on facts,
Okay.
6% say they run their business on feelings, and 69% say they run their business on a mix of facts and feelings.
I am with you, 64 percenters. And honestly, I feel like we all are. I think that percentage might be higher. It's hard. And listen, it is hard because our minds are so powerful. They will notice a change, they will sense something that is off. And automatically, our brain thinks we're in danger, right? It spirals out of control into thinking like everything's wrong, be safe, take care of yourself, something terrible is happening. But if you can train yourself, because you're not going to be able to eliminate those thoughts, but I think what you can do is to tie something to it immediately. Like, oh God, I feel like I'm just not good at this. Immediately, your voice should say, prove it. Prove that you're not good at this. Show me in the data that it says that you're not good at this. Go back the last few years you've been doing reselling, check how much more money is in your life and your bank account because of what you've done, and prove that you're not good at this. I bet you most of you can't because that's why we're here, right? We are good at this. We have been able to build something. We just have to kind of turn off that voice or be able to ask it for facts immediately before we let it kind of sink us. Okay. Okay, I'm going to move on. Listen, I'm not a psychologist. This is not that kind of advice, but for business, I am going to be your business mentor right now. And I'm going to tell you that in your business, your feelings are not reality. My feelings in this business are not reality. Okay. So I want you to catch yourself whenever you're using emotional words to describe business. I don't like bags. I feel like da 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 da. I kind of think that blah 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 blah. Right? Those phrases that start like that. I want you to catch yourself, and right after you finish it, train yourself to ask yourself, what are the facts here? Okay, Isa, you think you're not good at this? You think that A, B, and C? Give me the facts right now for what you just said. I bet you won't be able to prove it. Again, try to prove those negative thoughts with the data that you have. That's the beauty of having really strong, accurate data. It can fight your feelings in a second. It will shut down your craziness in 2 seconds. You're all out here thinking, I'm terrible. This business is never going to work. I don't know how to do this. And then you look at your data and it's like, huh, guess I'm lying to myself. So, because there it is. There's what I've accomplished. Here's what I've built. Go check your tax returns. How much money have you made from this that you didn't have, right? So remember that. And the other thing I want you to ask yourself is, where did that assumption come from? I don't like jeans don't sell for me. I'm not good at this. I probably will never be able to hit X, Y, and Z in this business. Where is that coming from? Because again, is that true, or is that a story that you keep telling yourself? I'm telling you all of this because it does affect the way you run your business. You can have shining opportunity, the best product, again, running like a Swiss train. But if you are the manager here and you've got all these negative thoughts, you're what's holding that business back. We are. When I say you, I mean me too. And at the end, just ask yourself, when all these things start bubbling in your head, what is the reality here? What is real about all of these doubts that I have, right? And again, having your data there to answer those questions and kind of like slap you around a little bit when you need some truth is really important.
There was one notable comment in the chat here. It was from Jessica. She said, I'm horrified by how much I'm not doing, though I'm part-time, but I am grateful I'm not alone in being overwhelmed and slightly flying by the seat of my pants. Jessica, you are not alone. And Isa, we're all thankful for this perspective and information from you.
Listen, Erin and I talk all the time. We're friends. So I say this from an experience point of view. I'm not up here all high and mighty telling you, like, I have never done this. You guys should never run on feelings. I am that person. I am very wrapped up in my feelings. And so the way that I've learned to manage this is I've got to come right in and remind myself that I might be, lying to myself. Prove it. And so when you say, what did she say, Erin? I'm horrified about how what?
She's flying by the seat of her pants.
You know what? That's amazing that you just realized that, because it's only January 14th. And now you know exactly where you stand. You've got a whole year. You've got to decide what you want to do with that year. And it's great because now you know where you stand and you know how far you are from where you want to get. Like, this is the greatest feeling ever. Anyone that's feeling like Jessica, or that feels like, oh my God, I don't know anything that I thought I did, great. Because you can just start building right now off of facts, okay? And then about me, why should you listen to this crazy lady yelling into the laptop? So my experiences from corporate America, and when I tell you that I dreamt of escaping corporate America forever, I mean, it's an understatement. I have done every kind of work. Like, I was a retail salesperson, a retail manager. I was a retail buyer for 11 stores, which means I was a professional buyer. I did ground marketing for a beer. I did brand marketing for our top brand, which is Pabst Blue Ribbon. And I started reselling on the side. But I started reselling with all of the information that I learned working for way smarter people, not always nice, but really freaking smart, that taught me how to run. And so when I start sharing my stuff on social media, I start getting questions about, like, well, how are you running on, how do you manage your cash flow? Like, how do you pay yourself? I started thinking, well, I didn't know people didn't know how to do that. I was trained to do it this way, right? And so I started selling from underneath my desk at my brand management job. That is the CMO of the company. Amazing man who we would be in like really important meetings for the beer. And he'd be like, hey, tell him about your sales. Hey, tell him about what you flipped the other day. And I was like, he knew I loved to talk about it. So I would then just take over the whole conversation. I start doing really well, but I start straight into designer and luxury because the whole time I've run this remotely. And so I need higher profits, higher payments to be able to pay the girl that helps me and keep the circus running, right? And the more questions I start getting, the more information I start putting out. And, I just realized that corporate America is tough. For any of you that are in corporate America and are trying to escape, I get it. But we also learn a lot. I mean, you learn on their dime how to run a business. And so then I took all of those unique strategies and perspectives and things that I learned doing everything I did in corporate America. And then I applied it to the global collective. And I guess it all works. Like I guess there was a reason I had to have all those meetings and be taught by all those people and go to all those leadership, conventions and stuff like that because it sticks, it works. So then I started doing, I have my dashboard, so I have tools, and then I have the business build out course, which is a business strategy course for resellers. And then I do have a free class that I would like to invite you guys to take, totally free, no nothing. And it's the top 3 reseller mistakes, the biggest hangups that I see when I did these consultations, when I talk to students, when I do business reviews, is mismanagement of resources, includes time and money, heavy mismanagement of time, fear of spending and investing, which is something that a lot of people, we just all have from families, from what we lived before. Fear of spending is massive. And it's funny because we live in a society where everyone's in debt and there's crazy credit card, debt because everything's so expensive. At the same time, we have a crazy fear of spending or investing in our business, which would help us grow. So that's the thing that you address. Little or no business structure was very common in a lot of the meetings that I did. People had goals like, I want to make more money, which is, this goes with the clarity on goals, right? I would have people say, I want to make more money. Okay, cool. Like, how much more? Because if you just say, I want to make more money, and you make $5 more year over year, was that what you meant? No. Technically, you reached it, but you need clarity on what you're trying to achieve. And then no defined meaning of success. People kept pushing the ladder, and this is to me too. I'll achieve something and then I'll be like, well, I can do that now. And so I never get a sense of like, okay, I've achieved what I set out to do. So I'm being more intentional with that this year. But all of this leads to emotional decision making that results in these top 3 reseller mistakes, which is tracking ASP instead of profit. And Aaron, I am not saying they should not know their ASP. I'm saying most people know their ASP and don't know their profitability, right? This middle one applies to almost everyone in the community, and it is going for the cheaper chicken. When you start sourcing based only on cost, on how you can get the cheapest items ever, you get into a rut where you're this is where you end up with these massive death piles that aren't selling. This is where you end up with totes full of $1 items that sit there for 5 years without selling. So instead of going for the cheapest cost on goods, I encourage people to look at the potential profit of an item first and then go back to see if the cost makes sense. Because sometimes investing a little more per piece gets you more value, which has a higher sell-through rate because more people want the item, it's got more demand, etc. And then the last one is probably the most common one, not tracking time investment. A lot of people just don't know how much time they're dumping into this thing. And listen, I have students that love to work. Like they genuinely like to do the processes and the steps or whatever. And I'm like, hey, you can work as much as you want. Just make sure you're making more than you are now per piece then, right? Because my whole motto in life is make more, work less. But if you like working your 8-9 hours or however you're working, but you want to make double that, work on your average profit. Like restructure your goals for that. So I do invite you guys to take the free business class. And then these are the tools that I have currently. I've got the business build out course. That is the main course. Again, it's a business strategy course for resellers. It's very dense. I would start with the free master class first, or the free class first, and see how you feel about how I work. Because a lot of what I say will sound counterintuitive. It's very different from a lot of the stuff that you hear and see in the community. So take the free class first and just know what I'm about and go from there. We do have our dashboard, which is what our students work off of. We've got a little bit of different views than other people because it goes with what we teach. One of the best charts on here is the greedy pricing, which a lot of us that do higher profit flips end up having because we get real comfortable with big flips and we think we're too good for XYZ profit. So this reminds my students that they're being a little greedy. We do have other great views, cash flow, and then quarterly divides, the year over year comparison, top profit and categories, all that. And the business planner. And the business planner I made for me, and then I decided to give it to my students last year, and I decided to sell it this year. The dashboards, Vendue, all of that is to manage the data, the business, like the actual numbers, right? But again, we are humans with wild emotions. So the planner does go into what headspace are you right now as you're taking these decisions? What are your plans? What are your wins, your fails, your lessons? What stuff didn't you hit last year or your failure is fuel? Like what things happened last year, they're not going to happen again, and that you learned from. So it's more for the business manager than the actual business. Oh, we made it.
We made it, and we have quite a few questions in the Q&A. Before we get to it, I want to remind everyone, Isa, you can stop screen share if you want. I want to remind everyone that if you have not tried Vendue, you can get 40% off your first month of Vendue this month with the code THRIVE, THRIVE, for 40% off your first month, and I'm putting that in the chat right now. Also, we have quite a few questions in the Q&A. We will stay, it's already 3, but we'll stay about 10 more minutes to answer them. If you have a question that you'd like for Isa to answer, please put it not in the chat, but in the Q&A. That is where I'm reading from. So Heather asked, Isa, how exactly do you pay yourself? I think she means like logistically or practically transferring that money.
Yeah, so there's a few. The way I would say for you to do it is if you do have your data organized, right, and you can see what you have done in the past few years in revenue, you have a pretty good idea of what you should be able to hit in total revenue, right? So then you then figure out how much money the business can sustain losing a month to pay yourself. The reason I like to commit to a number is because it forces you to be organized, right? There are months where there's going to be way more cash than you even think, and you can take that money out easily. But there's other months where it's going to be tight. But you still have to learn to manage those low months, right? So you got to pay your most important employee, which is yourself. And then you got to figure out how to manage with what you have left till the next month. And so that kind of builds something in your head where you're like, I got to pay myself first because I'm the one running the circus, right? If you had an employee, you would have to pay that employee every month, regardless of what happened. So get in that mind space of like, I'm my most valuable employee and I got to pay myself. The other thing, Heather, is I see a lot of reseller burnout in the community, right? And when I started doing those consultations, I realized a lot of resellers don't pay themselves. Of course you burn out. It's human nature that we want some sort of a reward for the time investment, for the work we're putting in. So even if you don't need the money, people that are doing this as a side hustle, hobby, other people that have like full-time employment, salary, you still want to pay yourself for your work because in your mind, you're going to get to some point where you're like, I work crazy. I work all weekends. I'm out here steaming stuff and I don't see Isa's wealth growing, Heather's wealth growing, right? Does that make sense?
Good answer. I like what you said about no matter how much your business made, if you had an employee, they have to get paid, period.
Yeah. And I think that's the management issues, right? That's where we have to learn that this is a business and you got to figure that out. So if your business has to go with like no sourcing that month because you had to pay your employee, that's what you would have to do in a real business.
Dana asked a really good one. Will you explain sell-through rate? What does that number look like? And I'm going to add to it. What do you think is a good sell-through rate for an online reseller?
Okay,
It's
so
hard.
sell through, yeah, well, let me see if I remember. Dana, right?
Yes.
Dana, sell through rate is at what rate are your products selling from the point that you bought them, right? And then I like to split up by categories, which Vendue does too, right? The sell through rates. Yeah, so you want to know so you want to know your sell through rate in general to see the money that you're bringing in, like the money that's going out, how long is it taking you to get it back, right? But then also breaking it down by category is important because not all categories work the same. Some will be working harder than others, so you need to understand which ones are pulling more weight, right? Now, when you ask me what's a good sell through rate, I suggest people don't get into the habit of that because I'll give you an example. Your sell through rate with a lower cost of goods and a lower sales price is going to be much higher than the people that are doing mid tier goods and the people that are doing designer, right? And so I think one of the biggest problems we have in the community, and I don't think it comes from a bad place, right, is that people share their information as a guide. Like they are trying to help people. But it's a blanket statement where that some people might go and see your sell-through rates and go, oh my gosh, mine are way slower than Aaron's. I'm bombing. Like this is terrible. I should quit. Well, we don't know what Aaron's costs are. We don't know what Aaron's goals are. We don't know what if Aaron's doing this as an invest. Like I have a lot of investment pieces, right? There's some Chanel bags that are going to live with me till the end of time. So that's going to throw off my sell through rate a lot. But I'm waiting for a collector to come in. I'm waiting for a big payout someday, and I don't need the cash. So, Dana, I wouldn't focus on anyone's sell through rate. I would focus on what you want to do, what kind of money you want to see in the business, what you want to pay yourself, and what kind of profit you'd like to see, and then reverse engineer to figure out what items you have to get to sell at what rate to give you that money.
Awesome. Someone said how to add a sold item into Vendue's inventory. I sold a couple on eBay before I cross listed through Vendue. I've got this one. So let's say it's January, right? You're just starting Vendue, or you made a sale elsewhere, but you want it in Vendue, so Vendue can be your source of truth. No problem. You can go right to Vendue, quickly create a draft, right? Let's say I sold this, right? We could say express, tan, turtleneck, medium. Once you save that as a draft, you can then mark it as sold yourself. You'll open it up. You'll click the three dots next to the Vendue form and you'll mark as sold. You can retroactively enter the date. You can retroactively enter the date you got it, the cost of goods, the sale price, the marketplace fees, etc. You can even add a picture if that's important to you. But once you do that, it'll be in your spreadsheets, it will be in your analytics, it will be in Vendue. So even if you're just getting started now, you can make Vendue your source of truth. It's funny that you say that because I started Vendue in 2021 in February and I did the same thing. I went back and entered everything for January. Okay. Someone wants to know more about your GCC dashboard.
Okay, so person who wants to know about my GCC dashboard.
Anonymous wants to know more.
Anonymous person, we will talk to you. The GCC dashboard was born, and I got to tell you the story because it's kind of funny. I created this course based on all the consultations I did, to be honest, because at some point I got burnt out of doing individual consultations. And what I realized is that even though they were all different businesses with different cash flow, different profits, different goals, the issues they had could be kind of grouped into like four different things. So I was like, why don't I just teach them all about these four things? And I bet you I could eliminate most of these problems, right? So I made this beautiful course, like solid information. Like I was just so proud of it. And then I needed a spreadsheet to give them. And I had my ugly one that I built in Excel and it was terrible. And I'm so embarrassed about it. And so once I saw it, I was like, this ugly cannot go with this beauty. And I remembered a girl that I had done a consultation with, Christine, my partner, who had sent me this wild dashboard. And I was like literally like Einstein's daughter. I like, what's going on with the sheet, right? So I ended up giving her money back because I was like, girl, you don't need my help. You need to stop looking at data and just jump. So I gave her back her fee for the consultation with the condition that she had to spend it all on one item. So when I wanted to build the chart, I reached out to her and I was like, "Hey, crazy chart lady, is there any way you could build the dashboard that I have in my head, right?" And she's like, "Dude, that's what I do for a living. I build dashboards for like mining companies to optimize whatever, right? Just crazy things, rocks and mining." She's a mining engineer. So I knew exactly what I wanted to be able to see. And you guys, I'm very visual. I'm a picture girl. Like I can't see anything when it's black and white numbers and like rows and stuff. I just black out. So I like to see images, charts, lines, and then I can start understanding the story. So the chart was built based off of what I teach in the course and the chart of my dreams, but I had to find the perfect person to build it. It's got more specific information for people that want to get out of super high volume sales and go into lower volume, higher profit. So the reality is if you want to grow your inventory, if you want to go past 4,000 units and your goal is to do volume, it's probably not the best fit for your business. If you want to scale down units and find a way to process less and make more, which is very niche, and I get it, it's not for everyone, then the dashboard is definitely for you. You can learn more about it. There's a lot of posts about it on my Instagram. There's information on it on my blog. But I guess that would be the difference. It's definitely built for people that are trying to do less volume, higher profit. And I don't mean designer, just lower inventory, little bit higher profit, end up.
All right. Last question is how does Vendue help sellers make money? And oh my goodness, I could talk about that for a whole other webinar. But basically Vendue helps in two ways, right? One is helps you make more sales. Two is helps you save more time so that you can reinvest that time differently. We've talked about time a lot today. So Vendue is most known as a cross lister with cross listing to 10 plus marketplaces. You can cross list to all 10 in under 5 minutes. So that's number one. More marketplaces equals more sales. Beyond that, Vendoo has a lot of tools to make it a seller's best friend. For example, you can send bulk offers on all of those marketplaces or all that actually allow sellers to send offers. You can delist and relist in bulk from all of those marketplaces. You can enhance your listings and have listing templates and do background removal for all of those marketplaces. Those are the money-making, sales-generating things. Now let's talk about the time saving. Time-saving features include inventory management, like what we talked about today with your spreadsheets and your inventory dashboard, analytics, profit and revenue calculation, sale detection, and auto delist, so that when you sell on one marketplace, it removes them from others. A lot of these tools are just designed to make you work smarter, not harder. We have a lot more questions, but Isa, if you want to remind everyone where to find you.
Yeah, if you want more information about anything that you've heard today, I can talk. I got information for you. So you can find me, Erin knows this. You can find me on Instagram. It's at the Global Collective Co. And I do encourage that you browse around on my past posts, a lot of information in there, a lot of free and paid tools in my link in bio. And you can always DM me. I'm kind of glued to this thing. So
Thank you so much, Isa, for joining us today. Thank you, everyone in the Vendue community, for joining. Don't forget, if you're new to Vendue, use the code THRIVE for 40% off your first month. Isa, we appreciate you so, so much. You can watch this again on the Vendue YouTube channel.
thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
All right. Bye, everyone. We'll see you next time. Happy selling.